J is for Justice podcast.
Jay, I like your podcasts.
Roberta.
Welcome to J is for Justice podcast. If live breaking news and following true crime is your thing, then please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you like what you see in my videos, please consider giving them a thumbs up. Hello, Roberters and Robertalinos.
Roberta.
Oh, it's been a minute since I heard that voice. Let's hear that again.
Chris and Roberta.
Hope you guys are all doing well today. Welcome back to J is for Justice. My name is Jay, and I'm your host. If you could please give this video a thumbs up. It is a free way to help those creators that you like to watch. So I am coming to you today, the bearer of some not so happy news, but nonetheless, my advice, when I asked for advice on should I report this or no, the answer wasn't or no. The answer was do it. So I'm going to do it. All right, so I come to you the bearer of not so good news, but nonetheless, I'm going to share with you. So there's a few different stories that all kind of fold into the same theme, and that theme is Russia. And I'm not just talking about the bots that we've seen in the chats on YouTube that we've innocently blamed on Russia. So we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about what's going on with the U.S. and Russia directly right now. And I think it's going to blow your mind. I think it's really going to blow your mind. No, first we're going to talk about this couple out in Hawaii. And this couple are alleged Russian spies that were just taken into custody just last week.
The United States military is tracking a Russian vessel near Hawaii's waters. That, according to the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. In a statement, they tell KHON2 in part, quote, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command routinely monitors air and maritime traffic in the Western Pacific to ensure security and stability of the region alongside our allies and partners. Going on, we are monitoring a Russian surface vessel operating in international waters in the vicinity of Hawaii. One retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel tells me it's not exactly uncommon for things like this to happen, but it does have the military's attention due to the war in Ukraine.
I have no doubt that INDOPACOM is watching as closely as are a number of other intelligence organizations trying to figure out exactly what it is. And they're not just watching the ship, they're watching everything the ship might be connected to and getting some real detail on what it's doing, why it might be there, who it's reporting to. All of these things go into a fusion process, an analytical process, if you will, that tells us, is this a threat?
Okay, well, this was May 2nd, 2022. Let's fast forward to July 27th of 2022. I would like to introduce you to Walter Glenn Primrose, a.k.a. Bobby Edward Fort, and Gwyn Darley Morrison, a.k.a. Julie Lynn Montague. These two were arrested in Hawaii after stealing the identities of dead babies from Texas, using their identities, creating social security cards and IDs. Gwyn, aka Julie, ultimately joined the U.S. Coast Guard. And when Walter Glenn, aka Bobby Edward, was arrested, he was working as a contractor at the Department of Defense. Quite scary. Let's take a listen to the report from when they were arrested.
Are accused of being Russian spies. They're charged with identity theft, lying on their passport applications, and conspiracy to commit crimes against the U.S. The two, apparently in KGB uniforms, were recovered by federal agents with the State Department Bureau of Diplomatic Security Service, who also discovered the couple had stolen the identities of children who died in Texas in the 1980s. They then applied for Social Security cards and other documents in those names and lived the lies for decades. Primrose fraudulently enlisted in the Coast Guard in 1994, according to the court records.
They do drug interdiction, they do coastline protection, and they work hand in hand with the armed forces.
Primrose had a security clearance working as an avionic electrical technician. He served 22 years before retiring.
Enough information disclosed publicly can enable the enemy to put pieces together, and that can tell us a lot.
This man served 22 years and retired from there. And these people are alleged Russian spies. Now, let's take a look at what their lawyer has to say about all of this.
Rose and Gwen Morrison remain in custody at the Honolulu Federal Detention Center, accused of conspiracy, aggravated ID theft, and lying to get passports. Neighbors say the couple has been living in this quiet neighborhood in Kapolei for about 15 years and pretty much kept to themselves.
Me and my daughter, we were kind of like shaking, just thinking, they were nice neighbors.
The feds released an old picture of the couple wearing what prosecutors say are KGB uniforms. But Morrison's attorneys say the jacket actually belonged to a friend, and both are wearing the same jacket in the pictures.
For whatever reason, her friend had this jacket, and so they got dressed up and took pictures. That's all it is, and she just wants everyone to know that.
Prosecutors say Morrison and her husband, Walter Primrose, lived under fake identities for 3 decades, and that Primrose retired from the U.S. Coast Guard after 20 years, then received secret clearance working for the Department of Defense. The couple also owned the house next door, which is being rented out by a family for the past 3 years. They're still there, and they're not sure what's going to happen to them. Neighbors say they always rented the place out to military families. As to why the couple allegedly faked their identity, Kao says she can't talk about that yet.
I can't address that at all. My client just wants everyone to know that she is not a Russian spy, and this has been blown way out of proportion.
An expert on military intelligence who works for Pacific Forum says someone with the level of clearance Primrose had would be in a position to do some damage.
Coast Guard does, of course, a lot of surveillance. They do the missile radar work and all of that in Hawaii. So there are a lot of things that he could have learned.
The detention hearing for both defendants has been rescheduled from Thursday to August 2nd.
So, what do you take away from that? Do you believe what the lawyer is saying? I'm not really sure how the feds could have missed that, right? Like, okay, so there you hear from their lawyer, and at least from the wife's lawyer, and she states, my client wants everyone to know she is not a Russian spy, but she can't reveal why these people had false identities. So that, I guess, to be determined. Next court date is August the 2nd, which is Tuesday. And we will follow and see what happens with this. Now, moving on to more Russia news, as this case is to be determined. Moving on to more news out of Russia. I've been following the arrest and trial of Brittney Griner. She is the WNBA star.
Going up elevator. motivate. Watch me demonstrate. On time, never late. I grind, celebrate. No pump fake, hesitate. I've been scoring every day. Champagne Perrier. Since 9-3, been in the box, now I'm stepping up to home. Like straight out the sandlot, now I'm plotting on the globe. I work hard, I show love, that calm and steady grind. Got this far, I go hard, let God take control. I was starving skinny, now my weight up, got no energy for haters. See you trying, see you later. 40 yard in the V12 and like 1.5. At 19, I cleared 19 in a month, no lie. Oh God. I was starving skinny, now my weight up, got no energy for haters. See you trying, see you later. I'm shooting for the stars, need no laser beam, blowing like the greatest, but it's one who's always greater. Go dummy, go beast on them. I go beast. Go deep, I OD on them. Apply pressure, put heat on them. Put that 500 degrees on them. 500 degrees. Go dummy, go beast on them. I go beast. Go deep, I OD on them. Apply pressure, put heat on them. Put that 500 degrees on them. 500 degrees.
Who has been arrested in Russia on drug charges of having a vape with THC in it. Now, she was currently playing for a WNBA basketball team when this happened, and she was arrested at the airport. And I've got some footage of that arrest.
Basketball star and Texas native Brittney Griner apparently remains in custody in Russia. Custom agents arrested her at a Moscow airport. This was back in February, we now know. They say they found vapes and liquid cannabis or hash oil in Griner's carry-on luggage. You can see that video there. Actually, she plays for the Phoenix Mercury in the U.S., but spends her offseason playing for a Russian women's basketball team. We have not heard any comment or statement from Ms. Griner or any representatives, agents, or what have you regarding any of this at this point. However, the U.S. State Department says it is ready to provide all the help it can, and the WNBA issuing a statement calling for the 31-year-old to be safely returned to the U.S.
So Brittney is being held. She faces up to 10 years of labor if she is convicted in this trial. The kicker is the United States has been saying they're going to try to help her any way they can. So they've offered an exchange for Viktor Bout in exchange for Brittney and another American who was convicted of espionage. So let's learn a little bit about Viktor Bout, who Russia wants us to release in exchange for the two Americans. So the United States has offered up Viktor Bout in exchange for Brittney and another American being held. I think he was charged with espionage. So he is actually in prison there. And they want both of them released, and they said they will release Viktor Bout. Let's learn about Viktor Bout, who they are exchanging for a vape cartridge. And I think it was an American reporter that was charged with espionage. So let's learn a little bit about Viktor Bout. This is from a 60 Minutes episode from 2010.
Viktor Bout, in my eyes, is one of the most dangerous men on the face of the earth.
On the face of the earth?
Without a doubt.
Mike Braun, the former chief of operations for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, told us Bout first exploded on the scene in war-torn West Africa in the late 1980s. Elevating bloody conflicts from machetes and single-shot rifles to
AK-47s, not by the thousands, but by the tens of thousands.
So he weaponizes civil war in Africa.
He transformed these young adolescent warriors into insidious, mindless, maniacally driven killing machines that operated with assembly line efficiencies.
Now 43, Bout from the Soviet Republic of Tajikistan is a mystery man who reportedly served in the Soviet Air Force and intelligence service. The U.S. has indicted him on 4 terror-related charges, including conspiracy to kill Americans.
What makes him a threat to the United States?
He's a shadow facilitator. He's arming not only designated terrorist groups, insurgent groups, but he's also arming very powerful drug trafficking cartels around the globe.
Taking advantage of Russian military contacts at the highest levels and the collapse of the Soviet Union, federal prosecutors allege Bout essentially became a one-stop shop, offering an unlimited supply of stockpiled Cold War weapons to bad guys around the world, including Charles Taylor of Liberia, who's now on trial for war crimes. According to the U.S. indictment, Bout had a unique selling point when it came to weapons trafficking: a fleet of cargo airplanes capable of transporting weapons and military equipment anytime, anywhere. More than 60 planes in all, his own private air force.
Those Russian aircraft were built like flying dump trucks. He could move this stuff and drop it with pinpoint accuracy to any desert, to any jungle, to any other remote place in the world, right into the hands of what I refer to as the potpourri of global scum.
By the late 1990s, Bout was a legend in the shadowy world of illicit arms dealing. So elusive that the only 2 pictures that surfaced of him back then were taken without Bout's knowledge by a Belgian photographer. Later, Bout became the inspiration behind the Nicolas Cage character in the movie Lord of War.
I was an equal opportunity merchant of death. I supplied every army but the Salvation Army.
U.S. Treasury documents reveal a Bout empire so sophisticated, so complex, hidden behind a thick curtain of front companies, that even the U.S. government unwittingly contracted with 2 of his companies to deliver supplies to U.S. troops in Iraq. Juan Zarate, Deputy National Security Advisor in the second Bush White House and a CBS News consultant, told us hiring Bout was a mistake.
This was one of the grave complications for the United States. Viktor Bout's tentacles reached so far and so deep that he had access to planes that could provide services for the U.S. government.
Zarate admitted the U.S. could do business with Bout, but it couldn't catch him.
I had always thought of Viktor Bout as untouchable. And I also, frankly, didn't think that anyone could get to him.
A challenge Zarate from the White House threw out at a meeting with Mike Braun and his DEA team. The DEA had just pulled off a string of extraordinarily successful captures of high-value terrorism targets around the world, like Afghan drug lords.
DEA agents live for the hunt.
Mike, no one had even gotten a sniff on this guy.
Let me tell you something, Armin. When I'm sitting there next to Juan, and my guys are sitting across the table from him, the very best that our government's got to offer, and he tosses this out on the table.
So what's the deal here? Was this back in 2010 exaggerated and exploded to pat themselves on the back, telling us how awfully dangerous and bad this man is? I mean, this is 11, 12 years ago, and now they're just willy-nilly going to trade him for a woman who had vape cartridges, or a vape cartridge with THC in it, for this guy. Let's listen a little bit more.
And I look them in the eyes, and they're looking back at me like, we'll do this. We can do this.
But it was about a 5% chance in the back of my mind. And so, I wished them well, and I went back to the White House.
Mike Braun's thinking 95%, okay? 5 and 95 make 100. He was going down. He was in our crosshairs.
The DEA supervisor put in charge of the hunt for Viktor Bout was Louis Milioni.
We felt that we could create a scenario that would pull him in.
The plan was to pull Bout out of Moscow with a huge arms deal he couldn't refuse. To do that, the DEA hired an undercover agent to contact a trusted associate of Bout's named Andrew Smulyan. The DEA operative said he had a big business deal for Bout.
I'm thinking in terms of fishing here. It's almost like you've thrown the line in the water. There's a little bit of bait. This is a business proposition, and you're waiting to see if anything comes back with a nibble.
We're really waiting to see what Smulyan says and what he says about Bout.
And that as it comes back, spoke to Boris, anything possible with farming equipment.
That's correct.
Boris was code for boot, farming equipment for weapons. That exchange led to the island of Curacao, a few hundred miles off the coast of Colombia. It was here that Bout's buddy, Andrew Smolian, would first meet the two DEA undercover operatives posing as officials in the Colombian rebel terrorist group known as the FARC.
The two fake rebels, Eduardo and El Comandante, would say they want to buy millions of dollars worth of weapons to fight the Colombian army and the U.S. military pilots protecting them. Smolian has to believe that Eduardo and El Comandante
What the FARC? I don't know who Eduardo
Right,
is
doesn't believe
and all
it.
this
We're
other
done,
stuff,
and,
but you get
go
the
home.
gist on Viktor Bout, right? Viktor Bout. It's a boot to go down if they let him out. All right, so that was 12 years ago. Check this out.
160 days from a prison cell. Brittney Griner holds up photos of her wife, Sherelle. It's been 160 days and counting since she's seen her, but that could change soon.
We put a substantial proposal on the table weeks ago.
The U.S. now proposing a potential prisoner swap to get Griner as well as imprisoned ex-Marine Paul Whelan home by giving up Viktor Bout, a notorious arms dealer nicknamed the Merchant of Death.
Paul Whelan and Brittney Griner, who've been wrongfully detained and must be allowed to come home.
Bout is serving a 25-year sentence for providing materials to a foreign terrorist organization. Moscow has pushed for his release for over a decade, saying he was
looks not
unfairly
thrilled.
targeted after his arrest in 2008 in Thailand by Interpol on behalf of the U.S. Officials here say the same thing about Griner and Whelan. Griner arrested in February for having cannabis oil in her bag at a Moscow airport. Whelan, accused of espionage, sentenced to 16 years after being arrested in 2018.
I did not plan or have the intent to bring any cannabis or banned substance to Russia.
Griner, who was born in Houston, testifying in court Wednesday. She's pleaded guilty, insisting she made a mistake. Lawyers arguing on her behalf, saying the WNBA star was prescribed cannabis for chronic pain. Former Marine Trevor Reed was imprisoned for almost 3 years in Russia, wrongfully detained until a prisoner swap between both countries weeks ago. His family lives in Granbury.
I think that they have a really good chance, especially considering, the transparency that the administration has used in this.
But the question now, will Moscow take the deal? The U.S. and Russia expected to talk about the offer later this week. The country's foreign minister...
Yeah, they act happy to report on this, right? Because they want Miss Brittney. They want Miss Brittney freed. At the cost of what, though? So here is our next update on this whole situation. The Russians are asking now for a second prisoner of theirs to be released in the swap for Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan. So let's take a listen to see what this is all about. Who are they wanting released now?
With breaking news, CNN has exclusively learned that Russia responded to the prisoner swap offer for the release of 2 Americans in Russian prisons. Sources say now that Russia requested a colonel convicted of murder and in German custody be added along with his infamous arms dealer in exchange for former WNBA star Brittney Griner and businessman Paul Whelan.
We have a team of correspondents covering these breaking developments. Fred Pleitkin is in Moscow for us, but let's start with Natasha Bertrand, who is breaking this exclusive. Natasha, what have you learned?
Yeah, Allison, so what we've learned is that in response to the Russian proposal to trade that arms dealer Viktor Bout for the 2 Americans detained in Russia, Paul Whelan and Brittney Griner, the Russians actually put forward their own request. And they said, well, we don't want just Viktor Bout. We also want this guy named Vadim Krosikov, who was convicted in Germany in just last year, about 7 months ago in December of 2021, for murdering in broad daylight a Chechen fighter. And the Germans sentenced him to life in prison. So the Russians, in response to this proposal, submitted this kind of back-channel request to the Americans. It was done through an FSB back channel. The FSB, of course, is the main security service for the Russians. And through this back channel, it was very informal. They said that they wanted this person to be included in the swap along with Viktor Bout. Now, the U.S. did not take this request very seriously. It was very problematic for a number of reasons. Chief among them is that this guy, Krasikov, he is still in German custody. So the United States would in fact have to then use its influence to try to get him released from German custody to include him in this prisoner swap. But
don't you
other
think
than that, it just
don't you think though that the concern should be Viktor? Isn't that a big enough concern? Holy hell.
Was not viewed by the U.S. to be a serious counter-proposal to what the U.S. had said is a very substantive proposal, which is to trade Bout for these two Americans. Now, it remains to be seen whether the Russians have put forward or will put forward any other request, but this just shows, this underscores that the Russians did, in fact, engage with the U.S.'s proposal.
Nobody said yikes,
whether or not the Americans view that
Ashley.
as substantive, that's another question.
Fred, you're sharing the byline on this exclusive reporting. The U.S. says that it's not a serious proposal. Has it even gone far enough that Germany has responded?
Well, the Germans certainly did at least deal with it to a certain extent. And I think one of the things that shows just how serious the administration right now is about trying to get this prisoner swap to happen, about trying to get Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan out of Russian custody, is that there were quiet inquiries by the U.S. to the German government. We have that from a senior German
These
government
links
source
will be in the description of this video so you can watch them in their entirety. Like that freeze frame there. So at any rate, I don't like the sounds of this, and I think that we need to be aware of what's going on. So let's say we follow this and see what happens with this prisoner swap. Because I'd like to know, like, where is Bout in this murderer in Germany? Roberta. Where are they going to go? Where is this Bout guy now? I don't know. I just don't know, but I wanted to pass this along to you guys. I thought it was interesting, to say the least. Our last Russian connection falls right here in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is a little too close for comfort. So it seems to be that Russia did interfere in our political election system. And I came across this on my local news the other day, and I was very stunned to see this happening right here in St. Petersburg, Florida. And what you're watching here is the St. Petersburg police hosting and introducing to you
Special Agent in charge, Mr. Walker, and U.S. Attorney's Office, Mr. Hansberg, that will give you a brief synopsis of the case in our city. Mr. Hansberg.
Here you go, folks. Hold on to your britches.
On Tuesday, a federal grand jury sitting in Tampa, Florida, returned an indictment charging Russian national Alexander Viktorovich Ionov with conspiring to use several U.S. persons as agents of Russia without prior notification to the Attorney General. As the indictment lays out in great detail, for a period of over 7 years, from December of 2014 continuing through July of this year, Ionov and his Russian government co-conspirators engaged in a malign influence campaign to sow discord, spread propaganda, and interfere in elections within the United States, all of which was orchestrated by the Russian Federal Security Service known as the FSB. The indictment sets out the objectives of this malign influence campaign. Among the foreign policy objectives of Russian government leadership is to expand Russia's sphere of influence. Russia targets the United States, and its allies, as well as other countries, to further that goal. Through these influence operations, Russia attempts to shape foreign perceptions and to influence populations in a number of ways. It seeks to create wedges that reduce trust and confidence in democratic processes. It attempts to weaken U.S. partnerships with European allies, to undermine Western sanctions, to encourage anti-U.S. and anti-Western political views, and to counter efforts to bring Ukraine and other former Soviet states into European and international institutions. To achieve those objectives, Russia influence operations often use social media targeted at U.S. and global audiences to sow discord and mistrust in the United States and other countries' political systems. This social media results in the dissemination of disinformation that is intended to confuse and mislead citizens in the United States, in Europe, and even in Russia itself, as well as to recruit U.S. persons to advance Russia's operational goals. Recruitment is an important and essential part of these efforts. Russia has recruited and forged ties with persons and groups around the world who are positioned to amplify and reinforce Russia's messaging campaigns in furtherance of its goals of destabilizing Western societies.
What do they mean, their goals of destabilizing Western societies? I mean, can they be a little more specific for people like me? What exactly does that mean? What is Russia's end goal? I don't even know. This is all gibberish to me. So again, the link to this will be in the description of this video. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but let's watch another video that's kind of laid out more for people like me. And let's take a look at who this guy was that they just arrested. You know, they arrest one person, we're supposed to feel safe. No, like, this is one person.
Moscow-based anti-globalization movement of Russia. With help from a translator, the FBI says he spread Russian propaganda.
Western propaganda is lying when they say that Russia has invaded Ukraine.
This week, that man was indicted by a federal grand jury in Tampa with conspiring to use a number of U.S. citizens as agents of Russia.
The facts and circumstances surrounding this indictment are some of the most egregious and blatant violations we've seen by the Russian government in order to destabilize and undermine trust in American democracy.
The FBI alleges from December 2014 through March of this year, Alexander Ionov was actively working to sow discord, spread Russian propaganda, and interfere with elections in the U.S. and around the world. The indictment alleges he and the Russian Federal Security Service relied on social media and also directed and controlled 3 political groups, one being the Uhuru movement in St. Pete.
Russia has recruited and forged ties with persons and groups around the world who are positioned to amplify and reinforce Russia's messaging campaigns.
They're using Russia as a part of a propaganda tool against the people to turn you away.
Uhuru's Aretha Akile Kenyon is alleged to be the candidate Russians were supervising in her 2019 run for St. Pete City Council, offering consulting and funding. At this point, Kenyon is considered an unindicted co-conspirator, but has not been charged.
Why take their money?
Did I ever say I took any money? See, no. I never, no. That's what I'm accused of. I never said that, so don't put that in my mouth. I didn't say that. Did you take money from look, I don't want to answer your question because you want to take it somewhere. I don't want to take it there.
There was also apparent Russian influence in the 2017 St. Pete race for mayor. The Uhuru group seen here disrupting political events. According to the indictment, the word reparations was part of alleged discussions between Ionov and another unindicted co-conspirator who appears to be former mayoral candidate Jesse Neville.
I think all of us that believe in the democracy that is America ought to be concerned because if it's coming down to even the local level, then our entire democracy is at risk.
The Uhuru House was one of 3 locations in St. Pete raided Friday by federal agents as they collect evidence for the current and possibly future indictments.
Today's action should serve as a deterrent to other foreign adversaries that the FBI will not tolerate meddling in our democratic process.
The other political groups allegedly recruited by Ayanov are in Georgia and California. The feds say what makes this alleged activity illegal is that no one involved was legally registered as a foreign agent. If convicted, Ayanov faces up to 5 years in prison. There have been no other arrests, but the FBI collected a lot of evidence, so that certainly could change. Allie.
It makes you wonder where else this could be going on and how much of it is going on. All right.
Sure does. Still don't fully understand this, you guys, but I am trying to wrap my brain around all of this stuff that's going on. It's a lot, but I'm glad to be able to share it with you guys and chat with you while we, walk through these crazy times that we're in, that sometimes we don't know what to think or what to do. And these girls' eyes are tripping me out, and I got to turn that off. So at any rate, I am going to wrap this up. That is your Russian update. Hopefully, we won't have a whole lot of Russian updates to bring you. I don't want a whole lot of activity, so I'm hoping for the best. So I don't know, go listen to something. I've got to get these ladies off the screen. Whew. All right, on that note, I'm going to end this live. I'm going to wrap this up, and I will see you guys soon. Stay safe and dance it on out.
I don't give a damn. I don't really care about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. You talk way too much. I have heard enough about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. 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 You wanna be